So I look at those seven verticals and say Reformation is when the kingdom of God overtakes, or the ideas of the Bible collide with the ideology at the top of the mountain. And this is why I could get behind a guy like Trump. So I was behind Trump in 2016 because I was aware that God sometimes uses unconventional instrumentality to produce reformation.
Phil Hotsenpiller here with American Faith. Special guest today, Lance Wallnau. I'm so happy to have you with us, Lance. Love your stuff. Been following you for years. We cross paths. We have mutual friends. And I thought we'd just jump into a light subject like Reformation. How does that sound?
Sounds like a lot of fun. Sure, the subject everybody's talking about.
So a lot of talk about revival. Everybody loves revival. I do. I love to read back, see what's going on. In fact, the lady that mentored me, I was a law student, got saved, and she mentored me. She was from Wales, went to the Bible College of Wales. Her mother was a part of the Great Welsh Revival. And I got to meet Samuel Howells before he died. That's Rees Howells' son. And he regaled me with great stories of revival. But I think we all kind of share that thing of we want to see revival, but Reformation. So I'm just going to kick this off and let you go because I know you can talk for hours on this. But I teach European history, art, philosophy, and religion in Europe every year. And one year it was in Geneva. So we really kind of dug into John Calvin and the Reformation that he brought about of really society and everything from banking to education. You name it, and I could go in deeper in that, but I just want to get your thoughts on Reformation. I've heard you talk on this, so I love what you have to say, and just give us your best shot. What do you got on Reformation today, Lance?
Well, first of all, I love how you're such a Renaissance man, just getting to know you here. I mean, you are the epitome of what I'm out there preaching about, the seven mountain world. So, you know, for your background as a law student, how far did you go in law before you got diverted into a Pentecostal sidetrack? How did that happen?
I got about 2 years into it, started reading the Bible, and I said, if this is true, I'm in trouble, because everything it said not to do, I'd done like 3 times. And so that really changed the course of it. And I transferred, ended up with double major, double minor, because I had so many hours that weren't really good anywhere else. And then got my master's, and I went to Oxford and did my doctoral work there.
Super. Well, and then you got your European history. We'll have to talk sometime about all this, but in our brief moment right now, you could appreciate the fact that Europe is a land of reformations. Europe has had reformations, and so the big distinction between a reformation and a revival, for simplicity's sake, is revival. You always hear the word personal. It's a personal revival. Revivals are like territorial phenomena. If you read about the Great Awakenings, I was talking to David Barton talk to me about where the Great Awakening happened, because I believe America's heading into another Great Awakening. And he pointed out they were historically in geography. There were pockets of awakening. Northampton, Massachusetts, Rochester, New York. Those are like the Edwards revivals or the Finney revivals, specifically where Finney traveled around. So revival is personal. It's catching something like virus. It's a God virus, and you get it, and the revival hits you, and you respond to it, and you come under the influence of the revival. Reformation is an institutional phenomena, and for me, it's a more powerful, almost cataclysmic shift, because it's one thing to cast a demon out of a person. It's another thing to cast a principality out of an institution. So wars sometimes in Earth history are really reformations that are working out in the proxy battle of Earth as a battle scene. Nazi Germany, for instance, became an embodiment of an ideology that took over the strongholds, which became institutional. And that's why I talk about 7 institutions. You know, the church and the family, education, government, media, arts, and business. Because no matter what you do, when you pick up a newspaper, you're going to see one of those 7s as a highlight issue, because that's the 7 institutional verticals that shape the minds of masses. Satan's not stupid. If he can establish an ideological stronghold at the top of a religion mountain, he's got Islam, baby. If he can link government to it, he's got a caliphate coming. If he can link oil to it, he's got a funded caliphate Islam. So I look at those 7 verticals and say Reformation is when the kingdom of God overtakes, or the ideas of the Bible collide with the ideology at the top of the mountain. And this is why I could get behind a guy like Trump. So I was behind Trump in 2016 because I was aware that God sometimes uses unconventional instrumentality to produce reformation. We're looking for the revival night to come in. Some guy speaks Christianese, riding on a horse, and Christianizes stuff. Well, we don't have that much punch. But God will send in a Churchill or a Lincoln who has a Roosevelt behind him, or a Trump as a blunt force object to affect the Reformation if the church is able to hold the ideas that can fill that vacuum. And sometimes they become sanitized Christian thinking, like there's one male, one female. Well, it's a biblical concept, but Trump isn't quoting Genesis. He's saying just male and female. So our ideas are basically being articulated, even if they don't come out in King James.
Yeah, good thought. You know, a book was written a number of years ago called A Certain Trumpet, and there it went through world leaders, one of whom was Winston Churchill, and it talked about how Churchill was a great wartime president or prime minister, and as we know, he was a lousy peacetime prime minister. And so the certain trumpet is that there is a calling for that reformer in a season that works very, very well in that season, like Calvin in Geneva, which was really the crossroads of thieves. And when they brought him in, he was one of the highest, if not the highest paid man in all of Europe. And one of the first things he did was initiated the church bell. And when the church bell rang, one member of your family had to be in church on Sunday, or the head of the household would be arrested. And what he wanted to do was make sure that that message got back, at least in some form, to a family. And that was part of the Reformation that later became the Blue Laws that we understand in early America, that helped to shape and model society. And I really believe that a lot of people, you know, back in the late 70s, probably 60s, said, you know, you can't legislate morality, but we do it all the time. And it helps to shape society, to bring order where there is chaos and disorder. So I love the thought you had about Trump and what he's doing in bringing about some change. Hopefully the change is going to be beyond 4 years, and we'll see an extenuation of that.
Yeah, and you make an interesting point. So part of my concern is I was in Israel about 7 days before Hamas struck, and I was standing outside the mosque on the temple stairs, the old stairs that go outside the wall. And it was where traditionally we think Peter preached the Pentecost sermon. And there's the mikvahs there for baptism all around, kind of carved into the ground. And I stood there, and I don't hear the Lord all the time, but it's interesting when I go to Israel, I sometimes do. And I heard the Lord say, it's my desire that Donald Trump be president. And I knew that this was 2020. This was going to be this election. This is 2024. And it's my desire that he be president for the sake of the nations. And I heard the Lord say the second part. Brother, when I heard for the sake of the nations. I know Trump's agenda is wrap things up globally, tamp them down for the sake of business in America. His focus is making America great. He's not trying to save the world. He's trying to save America. But I also know that his destiny is going to be involved with the reshaping of the nations. And here's my thesis on this. I don't just believe in reformation as a necessity for the preservation of our culture, which, by the way, is an almost impossible project. If you listen to Victor Davis Hanson, he'll tell you that there's never been a nation that set back the progressive agenda permanently. It's like a temporary thing. The juggernaut is so systemic. It's so deeply woven into the addiction to government money is so vast that he said it's what Trump is attempting is a first time. So that gives you a sober realization that it's not only just 4 years, but it's what he's trying to undertake in terms of institutional reform, moving away from this progressive bent the arc that we've been on is historic. And so it's worth hearing Hanson, who loves Trump, say it's really never been done. But we're attempting to do it. But I realize that for the sake of the nations means that sovereign nations are an important concept. The fact that nations have boundaries, have culture, have history, particularly nations that are democracies with a Christian community where there's freedom of religion. And I'm focusing on those nations, and I really believe that it's part of God's agenda that Trump be in office in such a way that he shakes and shapes the architecture of how nations conduct themselves for the next 3.5 years, because Christians in these countries have got to wake up to the fact that it's a hostile world. And we could be in a scenario at end time events where things are going, where we're going to have to be far more unified and intelligent about how we engage culture, which is why a sleeping church is such a fury to me right now, because God is literally like Elisha saying to the king, smite the arrows on the ground. Now, fire through the window, smite the arrows. And the king does 3 punches on the ground, and the prophet's furious. The king goes, I don't get you prophets. What are you upset about? You should have smitten the ground 5, 6, 7 times. I really feel like Trump's executive orders have to become laws. For them to become laws, we have to be able to seize the midterms. To get to the midterms, we have to assume that we're not going to lose like we always do. The gavel's going to go to Hakeem Jeffries, and he's going to impeach Donald Trump. This is the trajectory. You can see where the architecture goes. We need to interrupt that and literally disrupt that. So it's not 4 years, it's less than 2. And when you think that way, you think more pragmatically, you think more urgently. And I am a full-blooded Pentecostal Christian. So I'm walking in 2 worlds at one time. I'm looking at nations that are opening up. And right now, I just came from Bibi Netanyahu last week, meeting with him and his staff. My team has been working with Viktor Orban's team in Hungary, with Bukele in El Salvador. These are what I call the emerging sovereign nations, the sheep nations in Matthew 25. That are able to preserve religious liberties so they will not persecute the Jew, they will not persecute the Christian in a coming period of religious hostility. And the nations are open right now for that kind of revival. Now, that is revival in those countries.
Yeah, that's good. And that a lot of people don't understand how important nations are from a biblical perspective. In fact, in that Matthew passage in 24 and 25 of chapters 24 and 25, it talks about there's going to be a judgment of the nations. And nations have to have boundaries, they have to have laws, they have those things. And it says he will separate before the millennial reign the sheep nations, the goat nations, who will enter into the millennial reign. And nations in the Bible, in the plural, always excludes the Jewish nation. It's always in the singular, and it's a distinction that God wants us to understand when it comes to nations. So I really believe what you said was right on point, especially when we talk about national sovereignty and influencing. One nation that's influences another. It's almost like FOMO. I got a fear of missing out here. What am I missing? What am I going to miss? There's something happening, and I'm excited about it, but most churches that I know are not involved at all in Reformation. In fact, they're really not involved in their community whatsoever. When we started this church about 13 years ago, first thing I said was, we're going to be the best connected church to the city of Anaheim we possibly can, which is the largest city in Orange County. And we were very methodical about knowing the mayor. We have 5 mayors in our church right now. We have 26 attorneys in our church right now. So we understand how power works within society, and you have to be able to use that, and you have to be very intentional about that, or you will lose ground all day long. So what's the end result of that? We never asked the city for anything, but when we went in to get our first conditional use permit, it was approved in 8 minutes. My architect looked at me and said, I've been doing this 35 years. I've never seen anything like it. Our second was approved in 5 minutes. And it was because they knew us. We were friends with them, and we had never asked them for anything. I didn't ask them even for a fast ride through the conditional use permit for a new building. But you see, God honors those who honor somebody else.
I love what you're saying. So this is what I would say is the kind of thinking that the pastor reformer, if people don't embrace the word apostolic, it's the pastor reformer, the one who can think in terms of shepherding a flock, feeding it, educating it, maturing it, but engaging it. So out here in Fort Worth, my kids go to a church called Mercy Culture. And Mercy Culture is, I get involved with them whenever they have a political conflict, because I put them on the air and I use my big mouth to go advocate for them, because they've got 25, they do altar calls for salvation, altar calls for rededication, altar calls for marriages. But altar calls for civic engagement. They let people know where the offices are. If you're feeling led that you need to serve the city, come forward. You're not sure where, but come forward. We'll help you find where you can serve. They've got people on city council, people as county commissioners, people on boards. Next thing you know, the apparatus gets threatened because there's so many people from that church in the local government.
Mm-hmm.
That they start to push back on their boundaries. You can't have a home. You can't have a recovery home for sex trafficked women. That's what the city does. And the church says, oh, no, contraire. You don't tell us what our job description is. We can have it on our property. They had to fight City Hall, literally. They didn't have the favor you've got. They don't. I think the missing piece is they have the political. They didn't have the lawyers. You got the lawyers. That's a big deal. So, but the reality is they still won, but they're putting their presence into the city by making an engagement. It's positive engagement. It's not negative. Right. But the reality is, guys like you and Mercy Culture, we need and Jurgen, we need more pastors like you. How many are like you? Would you say 10% you run into, 50, 20?
I would be shocked if it's that high. Honestly, I know during COVID, I think we were one of maybe 5 churches in Orange County that I knew of that actually opened up and defied the government's order to close. You know, and I really think that was a litmus test. I really believe it. You know, it says in Jeremiah, if you've run with men and they've wearied you, how will you compete with horses? If a safe lane you fall down, how will you do in the jungles of the Jordan? Canterbury Tales put it very well. If the gold rusts, what will become of the iron? If the priests fail, what will become of the people? And so I think it was COVID to me. The pandemic was just really a test. It was a great test for who will stand and a great exposure of who will fall. And so if something really bad happened, what would the church look like? What would it would be a disaster because they can't take anything. If their latte's not the right temperature, they're folding up, they're going home. And so I think it's a call for manhood. I think it's a call for courage for the American church. I think it's a call to be bold. History favors the bold. We know that. And I think the bolder we are, I think we can strengthen the spine of others. I think Billy Graham said, when the spine of a man is strengthened, he strengthens the spine of 1,000 men. And that's what I think God's calling people to, because once you get over fear and intimidation and being threatened, you can do whatever you want. You can't threaten me because I'm going forward. And I grew up in a military home. My dad was a colonel in the Army. And so it was drilled into me the importance of courage and standing and duty and honor and all those things. Most pastors today don't have that great experience, and they don't even know where to go. They get their sermons off of YouTube, and they don't know where to go from there.
Well, and nevertheless, the call of history is upon us. And one thing I love about Donald Trump, is that he grabs every resource that gets presented to him and assimilates it almost like a king. He puts his hands on it and says, Dan Bongino, come here. Sebastian Gorka, come here. Charlie Kirk, come here. So I pray to God that you and pastors like you will be able to get on the front lines of this national movement, which is a moment of awakening and a realignment of the church in civic society and changing the way that they see the church. The world sees the church in a much more muscular, strong, intelligent, engaged, winsome way, because I really think that's Jesus. The common people heard him gladly. They didn't wince. And so I thank you for the work you're doing, Pastor. I appreciate that, because we need more people like you. And look, California, what do you think of Newsom? I know we only got 1 minute here on my clock. But what do you think of Newsom? Don't you think he's making a shrewd calculus moving towards Tucker? He's auditioning for president, isn't he? Isn't that what he's up to?
He's absolutely a chameleon. I mean, if it'll work in his favor, he'll be there. And I really think it's contrived, and I think it's going to fall apart. But I think he'll win over probably that crowd that the Democratic left, hard left right now, is disenfranchising. They go like, wait a minute, men and women's sports, I like a lot what you're doing, but you guys are crazy. And so I think it's a strategic shift, because they don't what do they have for a leader? Democratic Party doesn't have a leader. Newsom looks good on TV. he is definitely smooth when it comes to speech. But I see it as contrived. I see it as a chameleon, my personal feeling.
Yep. I'm going to tell you right now, Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer, I think they're going to be teaming up. I'm just putting together the tickets before they happen. I think those two are going to come together, and it'll be J.D. Vance. And I heard Donald Trump Jr. Was supposed to be on the ticket. I don't know if the old man made that happen, but so a rumor I heard in Hollywood here is that he wants Jr. to get his shot at politics. But anyway, listen, I've enjoyed this interview with you. I want to play this on all my platforms, and I appreciate the honor of being on yours. How can people find out more about you at Influence Church?
You can go to influencechurch.org, or you can go to AmericanFaith.com. And one way or the other, you'll find politics, and then you'll find Christianity, and hopefully you'll find a good connection that fits and suits you well.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you so much. Good to be with you.
God bless you. Bye-bye.